Welcome, everybody, to Week 8 of the CFL Pick'em Show on the Grizzly True Sports Network. The Grizzly True Sports Network is brought to you by Replenishing Care, the future of sports medicine. If you're interested in checking Replenishing Care out, go to thegrizzlytruth.net, click the banner at the top of the page. It'll tell you all you need to know. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in my co-host, Brian Schmidt. How you doing, Schmitty?
Doing good. Interesting week in the CFL that we just got out of, and interesting week coming up.
It's going to be a very interesting week coming up, as we just saw on Twitter a couple hours ago, where the Alouettes announced that they will be starting Johnny Manziel on Friday night against Hamilton.
Yeah, so many people were disappointed that he didn't play last week, and so that certainly getting that out on Twitter was a big boost to a lot of people. I had very conflicting thoughts about him playing last week. I would have liked to have seen him come in, put a package in, like to see him come in. But I also understand, hey, you're not going to put a guy in there with 2 days of practice and put him in a position to fail. So they held him out, and I get that. But now he's had a week of practice, and it's time to get him in there and let him swim. So it's gonna be a very interesting week.
Oh hell, let's face it, Schmidt. If you'd have thrown him in with no days to prepare, he would have been as good as what they had. And the bad thing
I
is
agree.
They do get people excited. They do get people watching, and then they don't play him when they said they were going to play him. I was disappointed. My sons had football practice. I didn't get home till like 10. I actually got on and just found out if he played or not. If he would have played, I would have watched the game. I didn't get to see the game, but it's kind of what you think it would be. Is Mike Riley threw for 415 yards, 4 touchdowns, added another on the ground. C.J. Gable made a highlight reel catch to propel the Edmonton Eskimos to their 4th win of the season on Thursday night, 44-23. Over to Montreal Alouettes. I don't know where to go with this because it's the Alouettes, and they're just not very good. I mean, Mike Riley's going to throw 4 touchdowns in his sleep against them. My only question is, when you look at the CFL right now, there's no doubt that the best team is Calgary. The big question is, who's the second best team? And to me right now, if I had to pick a second best team, it would be between Ottawa, Winnipeg, and Edmonton. And the one thing I will say is this, and I know you questioned it at the start of the season, as did I, and as did Robert. Hopefully Robert will make it tonight. He is unable to attend right now, but hopefully he'll be on later. And the big question was the defense, and the defense has played better this year overall than it did last year.
Yeah, it has, and I think when we talk about who's the second best team in the CFL, I almost get the feeling this is going to be a rotating week-by-week thing. Right now, I feel like Winnipeg is the second-best team, but 2 weeks from now, that could all change. I think there's definitely kind of a rotation there. I don't think one is that much better than the other right now. But Edmonton's defense has improved this year. I don't know to the degree of how much they've improved. Yes, they've improved, but I don't know if it's a big enough improvement. I think we'll see. I think at times they look very good. At other times, let's be honest, they gave up 23 points to Montreal. Montreal, has had trouble scoring, 10 points on air. So, sometimes I think, there's a little balance there of how good they are. But, they have improved. And when you have Mike Riley, you don't have to have a great defense. You just got to do enough and let him go. And we've seen that with Mike Riley. He can throw 4 touchdowns, just about against anybody.
Yeah, and if you look at it offensively, there's not a lot of great offensive teams here. So Edmonton could look a little bit better than last year just because they're not going up against, Ricky Reyes and Zach Collaros as guys starting quarterbacks. So I think that has something to do with it also.
Right. I agree. It's going to be interesting to see when they're playing, Winnipeg. Winnipeg with a great quarterback, Ottawa, when they're playing teams with solid quarterbacks on offense, just where that defense is. But Now, like I said, Mike Riley can gun shoot with any quarterback in this league. So, even with that, we've seen in the past he's very capable of winning those 40-39 kind of games.
Yeah, and for my money, I think the second best team is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, but they've got to show some consistency. Nick Dembski scored touchdowns through the air and on the ground as the Blue Bombers completed their back-to-back game sweep of the Toronto Argonauts with a convincing 40-14 win on Friday night. Winnipeg quarterback Matt Nichols threw for 253 yards and 2 touchdowns as the Bombers moved above 500 for the first time this season. And I just think this is a complete team. You look at even their backup quarterback, Strevler, when he had to play, played well. I think this is a team that's going to get better as this year goes on. And I really think when all's said and done, they're the one team that would have a shot against Calgary because they've got Andrew Harris. They can run the ball. Matt Nichols is a good quarterback. And just overall, this is a really talented team.
I think it overall is a really talented team. I think the key word that you said early was consistency. They've got to start showing that consistency to be the team to beat Calgary. I love Winnipeg. I love what I see. It really is going to come down as can they be consistent against the Calgarys, the Edmontons, Ottawa. They've got to start showing that consistency. Winnipeg has had a history of looking great against the Calgary, for example, and then they turn around and they'll play a Hamilton and lose. That's why I thought this game was so interesting in the fact that not that they beat Toronto, I fully thought they would beat Toronto, but they dominated Toronto. And this has always been a game where coming off the back-to-back, sometimes you see that second game, especially when they won, last week, the first time they played Toronto, sometimes you see you don't see that consistency, and they came out and thoroughly dominated this game.
Yeah, and Toronto's a good team. You got James Wilder, but with no Ricky Ray, this team is, I don't think, a threat. James Franklin is a solid backup, but as we've seen, the more he's played, I think the more teams have got the book on him. Threw 3 picks this last game, and Toronto's in a lot of trouble. With no Ricky Ray coming back, I don't think in the next couple weeks, or if he's not back in the next couple weeks, I think this team's probably dead in the water.
I think that may be potentially very true. Got to have Ricky Ray. And really, Toronto's got to start looking at the future after Ricky Ray.
Yeah.
They've got to start finding that guy that's going to be the next quarterback. And Franklin, I don't believe is it. So, you really got to start moving that direction. But this is a team that, the potential's there, but you got to get better quarterback play. So moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see if they maybe make some moves to maybe try to solidify that quarterback spot.
All right, next up, we had the Ottawa Red Blacks, 21-15 winners over the Hamilton Tiger Cats. Lewis Ward and his leg were basically all the Ottawa Red Blacks need to pull out a victory against the Hamilton Tiger Cats Saturday afternoon at Tim Hortons Field. There was no touchdown scored until the 2 minutes remained in the fourth quarter. And I think this does show us why I think Ottawa belongs in there, is you've got Trevor Harris. This is not going to happen that much with Trevor Harris. But in the long run, Jeremiah Masoli didn't play bad. But I think the thing that makes Ottawa a threat here is the fact that Ottawa, defensively, they've played pretty well this year.
Yeah, they really have. Ottawa and when we talk about consistency, Ottawa's another team that from that we need to see more consistency from. But they played well on defense, and Hamilton has played well on defense, and this was really a game defensively where both teams I thought defensively played real well. But we say it every week. Ottawa is a very dangerous team. The key is consistency. The same thing we talk about Winnipeg. Hamilton is a team that, again, I think can do some things, but I still think they're a few players short. to be that team. But, again, they do play good. I mean, Hamilton plays a lot better defense than they've played in the last couple of years. And so maybe they're a team that can sneak in at the end. But, Ottawa, to me, is just a team that should be, again, we talked about who's the second best team in the league. Ottawa has the potential to be that team as well. So I think that's why when we talk about that second best team, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Ottawa could really just be cycling that number 2 spot all year.
All right, Robert, are you on?
I am on. Sorry about that. I had a meeting with the Syracuse.
That's all right. Guys, we got CFL legend Robert Drummond. Robert, we've already talked about – what games did we talk about here, Schmidt? We talked about a couple of games from last week. And, of course, we talked about the announcement that Johnny Manziel would be the starting quarterback Friday night against Hamilton for Montreal. What's your take on Manziel? Because this is the good thing. The next game we're talking about is Hamilton at Montreal. What kind of effect do you think Manziel can have on this team that quickly?
If he just goes out there and lets his talent play out, he's a very talented player, but the CFL game is an entirely different game, especially for a quarterback. As I stated last week, a quarterback as talented as Johnny can do well in this league, but it's an entirely different game. He has to try and understand this game. I was fortunate enough to be able to play with the likes of a Doug Flutie, a Damon Allen, a Tracy Ham, quarterbacks who are all Hall of Famers, So I understood and learned from those guys. So Manziel just has to go out there and not be the bad boy that he tried to be so much in college and in the NFL. Go out there and just play the game and let the game come to him. Let's see what happens. Personally, I think if he does well, and if he does well the rest of the season going forward, this is just a stepping stone for him to get back into the NFL. And that has to do with marketing and money and things of that nature. But, it could be a great segue for him to, bring attention to the CFL. So as long as he's here, as long as he gets, more attention to the CFL, which is going to happen because of who he is, that's a good thing.
All right. So we talked about the first 2 games of the week. So next up we got Calgary. The Calgary Stampeders held off the Saskatchewan Roughriders comeback attempt and proved the record of 6-0 with a 34-22 road victory on Saturday night. Bo Levi Mitchell, of course, is Bo Levi Mitchell, so he threw 3 touchdown passes. Terry Williams added a key 78-yard punt return touchdown as they continued their undefeated start. Robert, what more can you say about Calgary? We always talk about how they're the New England Patriots. Their offensive line is, I think, the best in this league. Their quarterback's the most consistent in this league. The defense is probably the best. Is there a weakness here at all?
None that I can tell. I mean, Calgary's just the marquee team of the CFL. It's just the road to winning the Grey Cup will go through Calgary. And it's like that every year. They're the cream of the crop. They're so head and shoulders above every other team. There's going to take a Herculean effort by any other team to actually knock them off that pedestal. But right now, Calgary's riding high in a hog, I could say. Which is the biker's term. But you know what? The one thing, the worst thing for Calgary right now is to get complacent. That can be very, very tough for a team. I was on 2 15-3 teams in Toronto, and we never got complacent because we always challenge each other during practice. So I'm not in their practice, I don't see what's going on. But the one thing for Calgary that could be their downfall going throughout the rest of this year, especially the middle part of this year, is them getting complacent, thinking that they can just step onto the field and beat every team, because it doesn't work like that, because every team's gunning for them. Every time they play a team, it's a Grey Cup for that team.
Yeah, but the thing about Calgary is they're used to that.
They are. I mean, that's what I say. And Calgary's been doing this for years and years and years. It's nothing new with them. Even when I played, back in the late 90s, 2000 era, they were just a team that was just a solid team, good at, hardcore on defense, scored on offense. Jeff Garcia was there at the time, played against Alan Pitts, and it was just a simple fact of them just going out there and just being able to stop people on defense, and just scoring points on offense and having, strong special teams. Calgary's a great city, and it was a tough place to play. Always a tough place to play. So was Edmonton.
All right, Brian, let's talk about Saskatchewan a little bit. They lose 34-22. They did make a nice comeback in this game to get back in it. I think Chris Jones has done a good job with this team since they've lost Zach Collaros. They won, I think, 2 out of their last 3. They just lose to Calgary. Who the hell doesn't lose to Calgary right now? What's your take on the Rough Riders and their chances for the rest of the season?
I feel like he has done a good job. I think this is a team that can be, he needs to find that consistency. I think this team that could put themselves in a playoff position, but it's so hard when your quarterback spot just is, without Collaros, it's just not what they want it to be. This is a team that I think can beat any team in the CFL. Probably Calgary right now is a stretch, but everybody struggles with Calgary. But this is a team that I think is a good team, and I think it's a well-coached team. I think, unfortunately, when you don't have your starting quarterback, every week always puts you in an up-and-down situation. Some weeks you can look really good, other weeks you can't. And it's going to be interesting to see. I think this is a team that's going to be, can look good one week, look bad the next. And in this game, I certainly didn't think they looked bad. They made a nice comeback. But, again, when you're playing Calgary, you've got to play almost near perfect. And that sometimes is just, it's hard to do.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and transition. We'll go to Week 8, the first game of the week. Robert, we'll start off with you, since this is your old stomping grounds. The Ottawa Red Blacks go to Toronto to play the Argonauts.
Ooh, I have to go to Ottawa. I just see, at this point, at this juncture right now, Ottawa's got to assert themselves for being a top team in the East, and I just think Ottawa's going to win this game.
Yeah, I like Ottawa in this game just because of their defense. I think their defense played really well against Hamilton. James Franklin has been turning the ball over at an alarmingly high rate, especially this last game. And I think Trevor Harris is one of the better quarterbacks in this league. I'm going to go with Ottawa by double digits, Brian.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, when we talk about who the number 2 team in this league behind Calgary, Ottawa is going to be in that rotation of Edmonton and Winnipeg. And I think Ottawa is a real good football team. Now, if they can just find that consistency, I think that would be the difference in putting them to the next level.
That's their problem, consistency.
Yeah, well, that's Ottawa's problem, and that's Winnipeg, and that's Edmonton's problem. That's why they're a tier below Calgary, because Calgary's always consistent.
Correct. You're absolutely. You hit the nail on the head.
All right, next up, we've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders at the Edmonton Eskimos. This is a tough one to pick, Schmidt.
Yeah, it is. I'm gonna go with Edmonton just because of one factor, and that's 2 factors really. One is Edmonton's playing better defense, but the biggest one is Mike Riley. And I've said this before. I think he is legitimately the best quarterback in the CFL right now, and very rarely does he ever do anything to disappoint me.
All right, Robert. I think I'm going with Edmonton on this also just because of Mike Riley, because I think with Edmonton, I think they'll be able to score more points than what Saskatchewan can put on with Brandon Bridge. Bridge has played well, but I just don't know if he can put enough points on the board to win in Edmonton.
I mean, I agree, and I do like Mike Riley, but I mean, as you said, with Bridge, I just think with the comeback like that against a stout Calgary team, I just think that'll give Saskatchewan momentum going into this game. You can do that against Calgary. You can do that against anybody. I just think they'll have enough, to squeak out probably a 2 or 3 point win in this game. So I'm going to go with Saskatchewan. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. I kind of agree with you there. I want to go with Bridge too. I actually think he's played well. They'd won a couple games before this, but it's just hard to pick against Mike Riley. But I do think it's a toss-up, and I think Saskatchewan actually has a little bit better defense. That brings us to the interesting game, Robert. Hamilton at Johnny Manziel.
You know what? If anything, this will probably be the most watched game in the CFL up until the fact with the simple for the Johnny Manziel factor. You know what? You think you easily would say Hamilton just because of the disastrous Montreal team, which is Montreal. But I'm going to go with Montreal and Johnny Manziel. I think he comes in. I think he just relaxes and just gets into a rhythm, and he plays like he's capable of playing. I've said before, for the past few weeks, Johnny Manziel is a very, very, very talented quarterback. He just has to stop worrying about things off the field, or what an old coach I had called extraneous stimuli. Just go out there and play the game. If that young man would just go out there and play the game, he's one of the most talented quarterbacks athletically I've ever seen, especially for the CFL game. So I'm going to take Montreal, and what I would call an upset.
Yeah, and the thing that stands out to me in this, I'm going to pick Montreal also, and it's not just because Manziel, it's because Hamilton offensively has not played well of late. They only scored 15 points last week against Ottawa. Jeremiah Masoli has struggled the last couple weeks, and I would think, Hamilton's at Montreal. Johnny Manziel, it's a big game for him, but I think it's an even bigger pressure game for Masoli. Because if he goes out and loses this game, then you're going to start to have the whispers of whether this trade was a bad idea or not, Brian.
I agree, and I kept thinking, besides me, who was going to pick Montreal? And it's funny that we all same thing. I agree with everything that's been said, and I think it comes down to one thing, and that is this is an opportunity for Johnny Manziel to be Johnny Manziel, the guy that we saw at Texas A&M. This is that opportunity. Really, he's going out here with really nothing to lose. He's with a team that has struggled mightily. Now he gets to come in and be the guy.
Yeah, he's only had really a week to get his feet wet with the team, so there's built-in excuses for him.
Right. He has nothing to lose.
And here's the guy at Texas A&M that made a living off of the ad-lib play, scrambling around, making plays. And that, to me, is what we're going to see here. We're going to see him go out here and make some plays. And the flip side, actually, Mike, you said it, there's a lot of pressure on Masoli. There's a lot of pressure on Hamilton coming into this because they won a couple games. Things were looking good. Now, all of a sudden, they started to struggle. You trade Johnny Manziel. You've made your commitment to Masoli. And if he doesn't play well, there's going to be a lot of darts being thrown at you on this. So the pressure is squarely on Hamilton. And I think because of that, I like Montreal on this.
All right, so I guess it's not an upset if all three of us think it's going to happen, or we're all three just morons. We'll find out Friday night. Next up, we got the BC Lions at the Calgary Stampeders. Should we all just say Calgary at the same time? Is there any hope here for BC, Robert?
If Levi Mitchell doesn't play, there's a lot of hope for Calgary.
Even if he doesn't play, Robert. Even if he doesn't play, Robert, Calgary's the favorite.
It doesn't matter. Calgary's just right now just the cream of the crop, and they're rolling right now. They're just Calgary has half their teams. Calgary has 7 points before they even get on the field mentally over these teams. So that's a tough sell. Just BC's a train wreck right now. They're not beating Calgary.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see how BC can win this game outside of Calgary just doesn't show up. Calgary's just a complete team, and going back to last week's game, here's a team that not only does it offensively, they do it defensively, they do it special teams, they do it in every single way, and that's always hard to beat. Again, every week we say the New England Patriots, the CFL, and that's the blueprint. They do it in every phase of the game.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Any final words, Brian?
Yeah, I I am looking forward to Friday watching Johnny Manziel play. Just, not for many people, it's the curiosity of what he can do, but just for me, it's the hope that he really does come out and play well, and that he's changing his life around, and he's willing to do the right things, because, this is a springboard. This is an opportunity, and there's so many guys out there that deserve the opportunity and don't get it. And obviously Johnny Manziel is getting another opportunity, and I really would like to see him make the best of it, because I always enjoyed watching him at Texas A&M. I always thought that he was a fun player to watch, and I would really love to see him have some success.
All right, Robert.
I mean, out of all the games this week, the most intriguing one will be that Montreal Hamilton game. It's just which Johnny Manziel will show up. Will it be the Johnny Manziel, before he got drafted, the college kid, he just went out there and played relaxed and just played up to his talents, or will he be the NFL drafted first rounder they traded up for egomaniac that just ruined his career by just thinking that he was more important than the game? He's got a second chance now. He's playing relaxed. He has nothing to lose. If he goes out there, and he pitches an egg, basically what you're saying, everyone will be like, I told you so. But if he goes out there and performs well, everyone's like, wow, here's the start of his career. So, Johnny Manziel has nothing to lose, and those are the players you really, really, really start to fear. So, like you said, there's more pressure on Hamilton in the game than there is Montreal. Johnny Manziel just has to go out there and just play and be Johnny Football, what they used to call him in college. So it'll be interesting to see. Everyone's rooting for the guy to do well, but it'll be interesting to see how he performs.
Yeah, and I think what we know from Johnny Manziel's history is we're going to get something spectacularly good or spectacularly bad. It's going to be one or the other.
Yes.
I mean, and it's what makes you watch him. And the thing that stands out to me, and me and Brian talked about this before you came on, I think, but Calgary is the best team. I think Ottawa, Winnipeg, and Edmonton are the three teams that, if they could be consistent, may be able to give Calgary a run when you get to the playoffs. And I think over the next 4 to 6 weeks, I think one of those teams is going to step forward as that team that can challenge them. And I'm going to find that really interesting to watch that and see who kind of emerges from that crowd of three teams and who may be able to give Calgary some problems once we get to the playoffs. So, and I still would bet my money on Winnipeg with Andrew Harris, Matt Nichols, and a solid defense. But we will find out. And we will be back next Tuesday night, as we always are, for the CFL Weekly Pick'em Show. I want to thank Brian and Robert for stopping by. I think we have nothing else, guys, so we're going to wrap this up. I want to remind everybody. I was going to say something really intelligent, Robert, but then I realized I don't really have anything intelligent to say, so I just didn't say anything. But I do want to remind everybody, if you're listening to us on thegruelingtruth.net, that you can hear all of our podcasts now on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you find The Grueling Truth. And tomorrow at noon, we will be back for our daily show, Survive in Advance, with myself and Steve Risley, who played on the 1981 National Championship Indiana Hoosier basketball team. Our topic tomorrow will be about the Hall of Fame and the selection for the Hall of Fame. So make sure you check us out at noon Eastern on thegruelingtruth.net. So for Robert Drummond, Brian Schmidt, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.